All right. Welcome to the stream. Um, you guys can probably see. Let's get transitioned over. There we go. By the way, welcome, Michael. It has been so long since Um, I've played Morrowind. Um, man, that's bringing me back. Like Morrowind is one of the first games I played when I got my first computer in college. I remember sneaking around the rooftops trying to build my sneak and stuff. That's about all I remember of it. I don't remember the game very much more than that. Outside of the um, Neverine, I think. Isn't that the um, special blessing from Hircine? Sneak farming is real, exactly. But um, yeah, I it's been so long. Like Skyrim, I remember. Oblivion, I remember a little bit less. The main thing I remember about Oblivion is, after finishing that first dungeon, heading down and stealing the skeleton key to make the rest of the game easier. And there were a couple other things that I do like that, just so I didn't have to deal with like lock picks and stuff like that. But I don't remember Oblivion all that well either. Skyrim I remember very very well, but yeah. Anyway, welcome to the stream. And it is a rainy and horrible day outside. Perfect day to be inside writing some code. Um, we so if you notice, I've been looking for a good place to start this NX21 migration. Um, a lot of the stuff we did with the um, resource, I think I'm going to leave on its own branch, and I want to get the Sudoku game back in a working state. I want to get it in a good state so that we can play around with it a little bit in the future. Today, I want to explore some of the stuff of NX21. And we can go over what we just like what we can discover on our own, and then go look at some of the blog posts, just to see what we can discover from what they've shared. I mean, they did a whole week of it. I'm way behind um, on the upgrade. I wanted to do this last week, um, but we had the workshop, right? Was that no? That wasn't this week. That was the week before. Mother's Day. That's what happened. And then my wife's birthday. Um, yeah, this week I didn't stream at all, so it's been a little while. I apologize for that. Um, but family definitely comes first. So, um, yeah, we're in a position, and I just want to make sure that if we just do an npm nx build, does our build run? If our build doesn't run, then we'll get the build fixed. Um, and once it runs and our tests run, we know we've pinned ourselves. We've got our pinning tests in place, um, so we can see anything else um, that we need to upgrade, right? So our build runs, and this is right after we did a whole bunch of bundle size things, right? Like we went down that path. So I think if I run the tests, nx run dat many, and our targets will do lint test, and we'll do component test. And this is one of the commands I want to take a look at after the upgrade. Um, because this command, they've changed the way that this works. So there's supposed to be a new interface when we run multiple commands at the same time. So that's one of the big ones I really want to take a look at today. Is there were a lot of quality of life changes from what I understand of NX21. A lot of things that make our lives as we're working with NX on a day-to-day basis easier, which I'm here for. um, and I'm excited about that. There's a lot that happens with NX where I work, um, and um, a lot of exciting things just going on with NX in general. So I guess one of the big things that one of the big things I feel like if you guys, if we're, uh-oh, that's not good. That's the same error we were running into before. So I must have moved something or done something that causes that error. Everything else seems to be... So our component tests are still running. Well, there's only one failing test, so I must have moved something. So we can fix this one. But I was just saying, in an Angular workspace, NX does so much for you that I feel like you're handicapping yourself if you don't add NX to the play. It out of the box, you get testing, you get component testing, you get linting, you get prettier, you get all sorts of stuff, right? And that's a big deal. So let's see what's going on with this test here. So we can just go npx and then paste that. And we know what the error is. I could have just scrolled up. But in the past, if there was a whole bunch of issues, one of the things that NX has always been amazing at is just the dev experience, right? So you've always got the command that you can paste that gives you what's going on. I tried to convert our repo this week to NX, but the git diff was basically changed all our history, and I would have had to really change out library imports. Ooh, see, and that's why, man, that so your repo doesn't have NX, and you're trying to add it, right? Changed all our history, and I would have had to really change out library imports. That's interesting. I'm curious about what happened. Holy crap. 4K Angular JSON? Man, that is a beast of a project. Man, I don't think I've ever seen an Angular JSON that size. That is impressive. You guys are doing some crazy stuff with just the vanilla ng command. That's amazing. So let's go take a look at our app component and just see what's going on there. Dang. That is crazy. Did it work after the migration? It was just your Git history was so crazy, or things were just so totally broken after you did the after you ran the commands. I can't even remember what the exact command is to add Git or add NX, I always just have it. We've got this error too. Oh no, we don't. Okay, good. That went away. I was like, oh no. Oh, I ran into that before and wasn't happy about it. Okay, so let's see, where did grid component come from? So grid component. Oh, okay. We just moved it to okay. So part of the bundling stuff changed the locations of these two. And that was the issue that we were having. Let's go ahead. Just run our tests again. Make sure everything passes. We need to change up our library imports, as we basically just did absolute imports of the lib and not build. Oh, most stuff didn't work, but I imagine if I just revamped our import paths and exported public TS index files a bit, it would work after some toying. Man, oh, dude, that. So I would love to say that you guys are kind of unique in this, but I've worked in a lot of enterprise places, right? You're gonna see weird enterprise stuff everywhere you go. And what you're talking about here, where you guys just did absolute library imports, is fairly common when you start getting into like enterprise level stuff, right? And the reason that stuff like that happens is, I mean, I don't want to blame Agile, but I have to acknowledge the fact that like what we call Agile tends to push developers in this direction, right? Because say you've got a story that's pointed at like 3 points, right? Whatever, right? And your company is like, oh yeah, 1 point equals 1 day of development, right? That's fairly common. Which, don't give me like equating points to time, it takes a whole bunch out of the equation. But so you've only got 3 days. You get into it and you're like, oh no, I've got to figure out this import thing. But we can't fail the sprint, and I don't want to be the one in retro that's like, oh yeah, right. It feels like an excuse. Direct imports, they work, right? Yeah, a benefit of our approach is it forces us to strict type our life. Oh, that's really good. Properly strict type. Build it a lib. It doesn't impact application type. You can strictly type stuff like building libs. I build libs all the time, and publishable libs and stuff like that. That's not going to affect like strict typing and applications and stuff like that. There are other things to consider once you start going into like libs versus apps and things like that. Like your project or your TS config. There's one thing that I wish Angular would be able to do, and it's the package references that TypeScript can do. If Angular could do that, then we could take advantage of a whole bunch of work that NX has done, and a lot of this stuff goes away. That TPD Gamer 100%. Man, you're gonna get me started on this rant, right? But yeah, the moment you the moment your team says that points equal time, um, there's a couple of things that, when we're talking about development, um, there's a couple of common mistakes that you'll see everywhere, right? And one of the big ones is points equals time. And the reason points equals time is pushed is burn down charts, um, right? Um, Managers love their burn down charts because it's an easy way to take pulse and see, oh yeah, things are going in the direction we want, right? Um, the problem with Agile's not inherently predictable, right? The big benefit, and everybody throws waterfall under the bus, but the thing about waterfall that a lot of managers love is waterfall is incredibly predictable, right? Because task A leads to task B leads to task C, right? And you just all goes over the waterfall, and you get a specific amount of time, and right, and so every manager turns waterfall into, or turns agile into waterfall eventually. Um, One of the big issues with points equals time is you're inherently saying that the only thing that constrains our development team is time, right? Everything else they can do. So we're ignoring the fact that maybe they need time to, maybe they need failures, right? Maybe we need to learn. Maybe we need to do some research, right? And we try to fix research by doing spikes, but spikes are like, I've been at so many organizations where spikes are always 1 point, right? So a spike is always time boxed to, whatever 1 point of time is. Maybe spikes are time boxed to 2 points, or right. Typically, spikes are time boxed to around a day, right? Um, well, if your organization has never encountered this problem before, your spikes, right, by time boxing spikes, it becomes a mess. Really, the whole point of points in Agile, right, is, and not in Agile in general, but just in Scrum, is there's this concept of, I've got a whole bunch of sand, I've got a whole bunch of rocks, and a bunch of pebbles that I want to pack into, maybe a jar, right? If I start packing in the sand first, I'm never going to fit everything else, right? The proper way to do it is you put the biggest stuff in first, then you put in the smaller pebbles, and then you fill in the remaining space with the sand. You'll be able to pack more into that jar than if you pack the smallest stuff first, right? It's a way to prioritize how you're packing a tight space, right? And if we look at that jar as everything that constrains development, right? Time, ability, um, you know, I don't know, sickness, learning, failures, right? If we look at that jar as everything that constrains our development process, not just time, then when we're doing our sizing, we're sizing based on, oh yeah, that feels like it's big, right? That feels like it's medium. That feels like it's small. Um, and then when we go to do our planning, we can say, yeah, let's grab these big important pieces, right? And get them packed in first. And then let's fill in the remaining space with some of these medium and smaller pieces that, sure, they're important, but they aren't going to be as much work and effort, right? Um, and over time, the team begins to learn, yeah, we've got this much space, we can pack this much into it. And maybe as the team gets better, the space grows, and the amount that you can pack into a sprint, right? But uh, I don't know. I'm ranting, right? Yep. Libraries need to be updated. That's a technical debt that the business needs to allow for having non-function. Exactly, TBD gamer. I'm given a ton of space and time to make our stuff strict, but we just haven't worked on that one mono repo a bunch until recently, since it kind of dipped 2 years ago as we worked on another repo. And that's again one of the benefits of a tool like NX, right? If you have a repo, and this happens regardless, like it's not an Angular problem. you'll see this in React, you'll see this in Vue, you'll see this in you'll see this in jQuery, you'll see this in the old Kendo, right? Like old school stuff had this problem too, where um, over time organizations develop their own flavor of CI/CD, their own flavor of Scrum, their own flavor of, this is how we do stuff, right? Um, the problem is that when something gets left for 2 years, the organization has moved on, right? And so this is how we did things 2 years ago. Well, 6 months after that, we made a change, and 6 months after that, we made a change, and right? And so now 2 years later, how we do things now does not correspond with how we did things 2 years ago. And so now we're having to go back through archaeology, right? Code archaeology to figure out, okay, this is where we were. And then, somebody spends a whole bunch of time to figure out what's going on. And right, that sets the whole project back. It blows sprints for a while you're getting in there and learning the repo again, right? And everybody's like, well, what's taking so long? It's like, well, we don't remember what's going on. If you're using a tool like NX, a lot of that goes away because NX changes, right? But your interaction with NX doesn't change, right? Like NX run many hasn't changed 4 times, right? It's still the same command. Maybe what NX does has changed 4 times over 2 years, but it brings you along through the ride for the ride with migrations and generators and all of this stuff, right? So that's another real benefit to NX, is that you don't have to remember, oh yeah, we changed our CI/CD pipeline here. Oh, that's right, our linting, we did a whole bunch to linting. Oh wait, our packaging, right? We completely swapped out how we did our packaging and stuff like that. And so you're having to go, oh yeah, we did this, oh yeah, we did this, right? You don't really have to worry about that as much when you're using a tool. um, yeah, effective. Well, I will even, like, I've been doing pointing for I don't even know how long. um Pointing's always a guess, right? There's so much hidden in these stories, and that's one of the tough things, right? There's a necessary tension that needs to exist between product and engineering, right? And that tension is healthy, right? Engineering needs to be pulling for, hey, we need more time to do things properly. Product needs to be pulling for, hey, our customers really need this, we need to get things done, right? We need that tension, because without that tension, engineering gets mired in, oh yeah, we've got to fix this tech debt, we've got to fix this tech debt, we've got to fix this tech debt, right? And that sounds amazing, right, to our engineering brain. But from a business point of view, if all we're doing is fixing tech debt, customers don't really see that, right? If things stay exactly the same and all we've done is made it just a little bit easier for devs to import a library or do something like that, right? That's not real benefit to the customers. And so the customers, your application sits there and stagnates. Somebody else is innovating, right? But you're stagnating while you're fixing your tech debt. Right. The other side of the coin is where a lot of organizations wind up, where ship, right? We never fix anything. When we encounter it, we'll fix it then. When we can, right? And that leads to whole bunches of other messes, like tons of rewrites and right, like just messy code. So that tension needs to exist, and it needs to be a back and forth, consistent back and forth. Um, so I feel like there's always hidden stuff everywhere, where you're guessing, right? If we could make good estimates all the time, burn down charts wouldn't really matter, because right, to us as devs and things like that, because everything would follow that linear burn down, right? But that's not the reality. um, the reality is there's guesses and there's surprises, and even the most benign of stories, right? You pointed it at one point, and you get in there and you realize, oh, I completely forgot about this mess that we made, a year ago. well, how are we going to work around this, right? And suddenly a 1 point story becomes 3, becomes 5, and you're missing sprint deadlines and things like that. It's just the reality of software and the fact that humans just we aren't perfect, right? Um, and it's okay that our goal as engineers is to remove as many of those kinds of surprises as possible. Um, but all of the estimating and stuff, it's nearly impossible. Um, Separate repo was monorepo an intellectual property constraint, or was more so an intellectual property constraint. And there are real reasons for that, right? And trying to decide how much I can share, right? Um, the the best thing is just to go super generic, right? Um, there may be security concerns in your code base where your code base is only allowed to be touched by developers who have gone through a certain level of vetting, right? Um, that code needs to be isolated from the rest of the company, right? So like the IP constraint that you're talking about, you're going to encounter that more often than not in a lot of different organizations because there's almost always code that for whatever reason needs to be isolated from the rest of the code base, so that only certain developers with certain levels um, of permissions and vetting and whatever, right, can access it. Um, so that the separate repo is not that uncommon. Um, but it does lead to the kind of stuff that you're seeing now, Michael, right? That's one of the other big benefits of like a mono repo, not necessarily NX, but a mono repo, is that if all of your projects live in the same place, you can run all of your tests, you can get all of your upgrades, you get right there's a whole bunch of reasons why it makes a lot of sense. Um, right, those come with downsides though, right? Like it's often more difficult to make upgrades because when you upgrade, you've got to make sure that 30 different projects work, right? So there's obviously downsides. It's much harder to stay evergreen. There's a whole bunch of other issues, right, with mono repos. So I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, mono repos are, they're the silver bullet to kill this, werewolf or whatever. Um, Mono repos solve some problems well. Other problems, they make bigger. The problem you're talking about, where you've got to have one repo that only certain developers can touch and the other repo that everybody can touch, right? Um, it's really, really difficult to make that a mono repo. There are ways to do that, but it adds more complexity and um, quite often, the easiest way is just to have that actual, separation where you've got two different repos. So totally agree with the approach you guys took. Um, but like I said, there's downsides to that, right? Like they get out of sync, and that's where tooling will really help you. But like you said, getting to the tooling that's going to help you is going to be quite a process, and it's 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 the reason we get paid, right? Like if everything I did at work was amazing and I loved doing it, I would be paying to do it, right? Um, it's the stuff that sucks and that I hate. That's the reason that I get paid, right? They've got to convince me to do the stuff that sucks, right? The stuff that I love doing, that's where I want to spend all my time. Um, and so but yeah, I totally get it. I totally agree. Man, I feel for you that you can't be on NX. It's a tough place to be. All right. Um you guys sniped me so fast. Okay. So let's commit this. So fixed our tests. Commit this change. And this is the proper stream. So this March 16th branch is just going to live forever. We may come back to it. I think we can fix what we did with our resource by not using signals. We would still use signal store, but signals coalesce changes basically, is the best way to put it. And because of that coalescing, we aren't getting things to run when they need to run. One of the biggest things that I was worried about with the resources we were writing it is I was worried about like update storms, right? Where one update would trigger 100 different updates. I was very worried about that. We didn't get that. And I was like, wait, this is weird. Well, the reason we didn't get it is that signals weren't, they were coalescing all the changes and we were getting the last change. So our grid wasn't updating properly. So we may come back to it and use RX methods and things like that to see if we can fix it. But I'm worried that the approach that I took was just not the right approach. And because it wasn't the right approach, it may be more work to fix it. It's probably better for us to just move to X state. And maybe that's where we go. I don't know. I need to decide on what we want to do. But I think this branch will probably wind up being abandoned. Yeah, RX method or maybe watch state or whatever. Yeah. Well, except, yeah, I don't want to make it synchronous. I worry that the biggest issue we have in the browser is that we've really only got one thread, and that's the rendering thread, right? And so if I make watching the state synchronous, I'm basically introducing points where we stop that thread. And I'd much rather have those points where we stop that thread be in idle times of the browser and not. Does that make sense? And that's why I want to try to keep things as asynchronous as possible. But yeah. Let's see. You know what? From now on, I'm not timing people out. You come in and you try to sell stuff, you just earned yourself a ban. Oh, hey, Ole. Good to see you, man. Yeah. The thing I love about RX method, and this is the incredible thing about RX method, RX method doesn't have to be used in a store. And that's what I love the most about RX method is I've started adding RX methods all over the place, right? And it just gives me a way to work with, with RX method, I can basically say, hey, this method can accept, an observable. It can accept a signal or it can accept a discrete value. But I work with it as if it's, an RxJS observable. And it's the same way with signal method, right? Signal method allows me to say, hey, this can accept an observable, a signal, or a discrete value, but I can treat it like what I'm getting is a signal. And my chat dictator, I'm glad to have both of my chat dictators here in on YouTube today. I don't think I've got mod on Twitch today. Maybe I do. Maybe my mods are just being quiet. But yeah, thank you guys for doing that for me. I really appreciate it. Sometimes things sneak through. Oh, I do have a mod. I always forget that you're one of my mods, TBD Gamer. No, don't worry about it, man. I'm busy focusing on. Um, don't worry about it. You're here to hang out and have a good time, right? Um, if you choose to ban somebody because you want to abuse power, ban somebody because you want to abuse power. If you choose not to, somebody will eventually catch that. Hey, somebody's sneaking in doing stupid stuff. Um, but for the most part, chat's pretty good here. Um, Not a whole lot for the mods to worry about. But I do appreciate you being here, TBD Gamer. Um, you've got you've got so many icons by your name that I didn't I didn't catch the little mod icon. But thank you for being here, man. All right, let's get back into it. Right. Now that we've gone off ranting about the development method that every developer everywhere uses, and everybody says everybody does it wrong. But let's be honest. If you're getting code to your customers, somebody like me can get on stream, and for views, I can be like, "You're doing this wrong." But you're getting code to your customers. Your customers are happy with your product. Um, you know, for the most part, you and your product team are probably working well. So you know, I'm here to get views, so I'm here to say things that may be a little bit outrageous. But the stuff that you guys are doing, if it works, it works. If something I say clicks and you want to talk about it as a team, talk about it as a team. But let's be honest, it's unlikely to change, right? Like me ranting on a stream is unlikely to change the way that people look at points. So many articles and the people who came up with the Agile manifesto have talked about pointing and stuff like this. It's never changed. There's nothing that some random dude on an Angular stream somewhere is going to do about it. Anyway, thanks for sniping me at least, right? Um, so let's take a look and see how far behind we are on NCU. Uh, so NX, we're at least on version 20. That's good. And Angular, we're at least on version 19.2. That's good. And the rest of it looks like we're on good versions too. I was looking for TypeScript, but I'm not seeing. Oh, TypeScript. Okay, so TypeScript, we're on 5.8. That's good. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff like Striker. I'm not going to, well, maybe we'll upgrade Striker because we aren't using it, so there's not a big deal with doing that. But we're going to start by migrating NX. Yeah, that's the right place to start. So we're going to go npx nx migrate, and we're just going to say latest, right? Man, I'm so nervous to hit this. Like, I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, am I gonna mess something up? Whatever. If we mess it up, we mess it up. That's content, right? Um, all the rabble rousers use Twitch. We had the YouTube mods get no action. I'm watching lately. So I used to get most of my views from Twitch. Um, a good portion of my views comes from like X. But a lot of my audience is on YouTube lately. Um, and it's weird because it changes, right? Just depending on who's there and whatever. Um, but yeah, more and more. So you guys may get some rabble rousers there. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like for a long time, I was really debating just shutting down my YouTube live streaming because I didn't get anybody there. I've heard that NX have some new console features. Haven't? Yeah, I do. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to is the new NX console. And maybe why this is running in the background. Let's go take a look at NX. This, yeah, there we go. And where is the blog? There's the NX blog. Actually, you know what? Let's go here. So NX did a whole week of NX 21. Um, and here's the one that you were talking about. Oh, this is done in YouTube. Um, I don't I don't really know if I want to turn this into a reaction stream, but um, but here in their blog, and let me share this with you here in chat. Um, so here's the blog, right? And this is how we know NX right now, right? Where something happens and we got all these issues. Um, well, they moved over to Rust, and now this is what we get in the new terminal. And I really I haven't had a chance to play with this yet. This looks very, very similar to. Do you guys use LazyGit at all at work? I use LazyGit at work because the tools that I typically use for my personal stuff, they aren't allowed. Right, a whole bunch of different reasons why they aren't, and I agree with the reasons. So I'm not going to go out here and complain, right? But if you guys have used LazyGit at all, do I have LazyGit installed? No, I don't. Okay. Um, LazyGit is very similar to this. I'm very excited to explore the new terminal because it captures, like, here we can see it's doing all sorts of stuff, and we can see, hey, this one failed, so you should be able to go see the errors for this one, right? And this one succeeded, so you should be able to see the output for that. So some very, very cool stuff coming with the console, and in the terminal itself. Um, and hitting question mark allows you to see what you can do. Um, so yeah, Ole. Um, Very, very excited to see that. That's one of the first things that I want to see. So so there has been a migrations.json. The other cool thing, and I went to go see if it worked in WebStorm, but it looks like the NX console in WebStorm doesn't have the generator. But so we may have to dust off. Um, yeah, so they don't have the piece that they were talking about in the blog, with the migrations. So we may have to dust off VS Code. I haven't used VS Code in a long time on this machine, so I'm not even sure what the state of my VS Code is. Um, so that may be a bit of fun dusting that off. Um, I used to swap back and forth pretty regularly, but the JetBrains team has just been crushing it lately. Um, I haven't touched VS Code on this machine in a long time. Like, I use VS Code in a lot of other places where I'm not allowed to use WebStorm, right? And um, VS Code is very capable, but WebStorm for my personal use, I just find it to be a good experience. Um, So anyway, one of the things that I wanted to look at was the new migration piece that would show you the migrations and do a whole bunch of stuff for you. Um, we don't have that, but we can kind of, like, my workflow typically follows it, right? So we can take a look at this migrations.json, and we can see. So we're going to be removing the legacy cache configuration, more about the cache, updating the release version, change log changes. Um, so the error that you, or the warning you get recently with get jest projects, looks like they fixed that. Remove the previously deprecated and unused TS config option from the, okay. So the TS config and the jest, they remove that. Replace the experimental skip domain injection. This is for Cypress. And more Cypress changes. So a lot of experimental stuff is no longer experimental. Very, very cool. And this is cool, right? Like the continuous option is very, very cool. This allows you, like, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to with the new CLI is to do a run many test target, but then add the watch flag to it. In the past, if you did that, it would be a very ugly experience. I'm very curious about how the experience is now with the new console and with the new continuous option. If our tests can be set to continuous, there's some really cool things here. We'll go in and we'll look at the blog about the continuous stuff. But one of the places where this would really work is I worked on a project once that had a whole bunch of applications, like tons of applications, and they were all served on different ports, and they all needed to be running for the test application to work. And any of my coworkers who worked on the project with me probably know what I'm talking about. Previous coworkers, current coworkers, probably not, but previous coworkers understand. And so we had like all of these tasks that you would kick off in different terminals that would, kick off these different projects. And sometimes the projects would launch, sometimes they wouldn't. Well, now with the continuous, we can set those projects as being dependencies of the bigger project that served everything. But we can set continuous to true, so NX doesn't pause, right? It's going to kick those off, and it's going to give us a place in the output console for them, but it's not going to pause and wait for them. It's going to kick them off and expect them to just continue running forever. Same with like generators. So like if you guys are using GraphQL, right, and you're using an Apollo generator, well, now you can run that in a watch mode as a dependency of your project, and that won't cause problems. It'll make things, like your Apollo code gen stuff much easier. So this continuous thing, I'm really excited to look into that too. Lots of exciting things here. So we look at our package JSON. It's going to update NX Angular. It's going to update Storybook. Like basically it's taking all of our NX stuff and updating it to 21. Storybook is just being upgraded. So it's going to downgrade the ESLint config prettier. We'll upgrade that again. NX is going to be upgraded. And we've got Node and PNPM. Oh, I forgot this is a PNPM project. I've been running things with NPX just out of habit, because the last few projects we did were workshop projects and we used NPM for them just because that's what everybody uses. Okay, so, oh, and I could have seen that right here. So we want this to run. And then after that runs, we're going to want to run this piece right here. So there we go. That's in the paste buffer. We're going to get this going. And then at some point, we're going to swap over to VS Code, because one of the things I really wanted to experiment with, and they didn't go over it in they didn't go over it in the demos that they did for the migration, but I'm very curious if I can run migrate for like Angular core from inside of VS Code, and migrate for Angular CLI inside of VS Code, right? Um, so I'm very curious about that. If that's the case, we may wind up using VS Code to do migrations in the future, and then swap back to WebStorm to do the actual coding. Um, but we'll have to see. There's just a lot of exciting stuff, and the reason I think 21 is so exciting to me is um, there was a lot of good stuff brought with like Cloud and like Project Crystal over the past few releases, but this release is very targeted at making the developer experience so much better, and that's one of the things that I really love about I really love about just the NX team, like Narwhal in general. Um, they're engineers writing tools for engineers, and they use their own stuff, but they just manage to nail the DX, right? The developer experience is always so good. Um, and that's what I really love about just oh, look at that. It Warp is another very amazing terminal. Like I put this in the paste buffer, but Warp has encountered my work stream enough that it knows that after I do a no frozen lock file, I'm probably going to run migrations. Um, so this is where things get interesting, right? Because we're actually going to run the migrations. Um, so at my previous job, we relied pretty heavily on Project Crystal. Um, there are reasons that you might not want to use Project Crystal, and there are reasons why you might want to use it. Um, I found it to be a very powerful tool, um, and I really enjoy Project Crystal. Um, However, there are good reasons that you may not want to use it, right? Like having things be automatically inferred means that you know your project, if you don't need all of the pieces that you're inferring, you may get extra code. It may run extra things, right? Like if that matters to you, then you know Project Crystal. You probably, I mean, you could always add your own configurations, right? And then Project Crystal won't kick off. But some of the really cool things that we used Project Crystal for was we could create files that just had the configurations that were unique to that library or that application. And when I talk about an application that had multiple applications in it, um, there were close to 20 some odd applications that needed to be kicked off for the main application. And they each needed their own port and all of this stuff, right? Maintaining 20 some odd configurations, right, across all of that stuff can be very prohibitive. Um, because if you make a change, now you've got to go into 20 projects and make sure you make that change in 20 places. And if you miss one, then you've got one that's out of sync with all the rest, right? Um, with Project Crystal, we could make it so that only the pieces that we cared about were the ones that existed in 20 different places. But all of the common stuff existed in one place. So, the all the configurations for our projects were in one place. Project Crystal used that, and then it would create overrides based on the unique settings like the port and different things like that, right? Like version strings and things like there were a whole bunch of things that we were using that needed to be unique, but there was 90% of it was the same across 20 projects. Project Crystal was amazing for that, right? If you don't have that use case, and you don't necessarily want code running all the time, then maybe Project Crystal isn't for you. I found it to be very stable. It was pretty rocky in the beginning, I will admit, and I think the NX team would admit that too. But they quickly fixed a lot of those issues, and by now I think it's production ready, and it solves those issues, right? It allows you to do some pretty cool stuff, like maybe on an affected command. Maybe you don't want to open up 20 different ports. Maybe you only want to give 4 or 5 ports, right? Maybe you're running an affected test. Maybe you only want 4 or 5 ports instead of 20 ports open for testing. With Project Crystal, you can do some pretty cool stuff where you can hook in and have a pool of ports, and provide the proper ports so you don't get port collisions and things like that. A lot of very, very cool things that Project Crystal allows you to do that that make your life, as a maintainer of like maybe a CI pipeline or a CI/CD pipeline or something like that. It makes your life way easier. It does take a little bit of thinking, and you will spend time writing generators, but in the long run, if you write generators, having tools that spin up and then don't have to worry about the config, instead they can use the base config, and they only need to ask, what port would you like to run this on, and things like that. It's such a good experience. So would I recommend it? Absolutely. Ole. So let's take a look at what happened here. So it looks like all of this stuff ran just fine. Remove the legacy cache, remove custom task runners. So it looks like we have one Cypress conf or Cypress.config that needed to be changed. Looks like we had, set the continuous option. I'm excited about that one. I had manually removed the legacy cache, so we didn't need to do that. I didn't have any custom task runners. I wasn't using this. Because we were using Project Crystal, I think we got this for free and it didn't have to make changes, right? Same here, same here, same here, and same here. So we removed all the config files from this project a while ago. So we're getting a lot of the Project Crystal stuff. So if we look at our tsconfig base, nothing was changed. Our lock file, we already looked at our package.json. Migrations, we looked at that. So here, inject document domain true. cy.origin. Okay, that's interesting. And then, so the serve is set as a continuous option in our development environment. Oh no, serve is just set as a continuous option in general. The default configuration is development, but serve is a continuous action. So there we go. So we upgraded to NX21. And I don't recommend doing what I do. Like I say this every time I do it. I do this for content, right? Me having to, what is this? What is this? Oh, that's cool. Very cool that it's picking up the, yeah, there's probably a merge conflict. Why would there be a merge conflict? I don't know. We'll figure it out when it's time to actually merge. Um, but I got distracted by the merge conflict. Oh yeah, this I I do this kind of stuff for content. Um, it I don't necessarily well, I'll tell you right now what we should have done before I did that um is um we should have done this. So we should have run build lint test um and we can even run component test, right? Let's just see how much we can get NX to do with NX21. Um, yeah, no problem, Ole. And anybody else, right? If you guys have questions about what I'm doing, or like, I mean, I joke about about being sniped and stuff like that, but it's joking. All jokes aside, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask. Um, right? I'm happy to answer your questions. I'm happy to. Um, my goal is to help everybody be um, is to help everybody be better. That's honestly my goal. Um, this is interesting because I expected us to have the new console, right? It looks like my component tests are failing. Um, so the inject document. Okay, so that one. So the component test didn't work, and it didn't work because it added the inject document domain. Um, and it looks like that's only available on E to E. So this Cypress config right here, um, we're not running E to E testing here. There's only component tests here. This is an interesting one because I'm curious about how components versus end-to-end tests will work. But we can go modify this file, um, and we can just pull all of this out. Save that, and we don't run E to E tests in components, right? So now if I push that, oh, and that change was the change that actually caused, no, I was wrong. That's okay. Never mind. But now we should be able to run this command. I'm curious, what if I run this with npx nx and build? Let's run it with npx and see what happens. If we get a different console, I was expecting to see a different console here. No, we're still getting the same console. Yeah, absolutely. You can know Michael is on top of things. And he's amazing. Michael is constantly pointing me in directions. Um, I, a lot of the ideas that I get are based on Michael just making a comment. Hey, dude, did you see this? Hey, did you see this? I love it. It's a huge help, and thanks a lot for that, Michael. You've been a huge help. I really appreciate it. So yeah, removing that fixed everything. Everything passes, so we're good. I'm curious why. So let's do pnpm exec nx. Let's do, like, I would expect run dash many target test. Let's just add the watch flag and see what happens. Right? So we see all of these things running, but I'm not getting. Let's go see what I'm missing. So yes, so here, run many, you'll notice this. So yeah, btop provided a great looking UI. See the results we've built. So you can see that it's running the serve. Maybe npm exec nx run many -t serve. Let's just see if my serve targets. I'm still getting the old. So I am on NX21. See, I don't think I'm getting this, right? Um, oh, ouch. um, that explains it. Dang it. And if you want speculation about forms, I've been watching the prototype. Um, yes, signal forms is what he's talking about, Ola, and he has been watching the prototype. Um, there's a public branch out there. Any speculation you want to share is welcome, Michael. Um, he's been sharing the links to repositories for me. I've been taking a look also. Um, I'm actually a little bit disappointed. I was really hoping to see this. Um, but this comment right here, tells me a lot, because when I worked at Fidelis Cybersecurity, I helped develop a piece of software that you could open a terminal from the command server on any endpoint. Like, and when you're talking endpoint in like cybersecurity type stuff, you're talking about individual machines, right? So we were trying to open terminals on anything. So like Linux, Mac, Unix. We even did like some of the tablets and phones. And the biggest issue was Windows. And so right here, I'm using Warp, but Warp, I'm using the Windows terminal underneath, right? So the only reason Warp works in Windows is because it uses the terminal underneath, the Windows terminal. It's the new modern terminal, and the new Windows terminal is very very similar to the way terminals work in like Linux and Mac and all of that stuff. The stuff they're not saying here is things get very very messy once you get outside of the Windows terminal. So if people are trying to use CMD in Windows, and they're on a version of Windows that CMD does not use, the Windows terminal, it uses the old command shell. Like there's a whole bunch of different shells in Windows, and if you're not using the Windows terminal, right, like you don't know if they're using PowerShell, you don't know if they're using Command Shell, you don't know if they're using. I think there's a special shell for running batch programs. There's all these different special shells, and so the amount of code, and I didn't write this code. The way it worked is it used a whole bunch of there was a whole bunch of chaining to get through firewalls and all of that stuff. But the way it worked is you would open up a WebSocket from your browser to the command and control server. And because it was from your browser to a server inside of the firewall, that wasn't that difficult. That was one hop. But we couldn't go from that server to an endpoint, right? Going through firewalls from a server is a security risk. So we had to go the other way. Well, we had the ability to drop a file and tell it to execute on an endpoint. So we would drop the file that would open up the shells. And once the shell was opened, it would then start a terminal wrapper. And that terminal wrapper would have to set up all sorts of different things. And that's where things got really ugly, is because doing that terminal emulation for the different shells was really, really difficult to know, based on the version of Windows and all. There's just a whole bunch of messes. And then like command keys could get all messed up. Like the amount of time we spent just opening up these shells, right? And then that wrapper would create a WebSocket to maybe a DMZ server. That DMZ server would then create a WebSocket back to the command and control server, right? And so we were chaining WebSockets. And so your browser would send a WebSocket to the right, and it would jump and it would jump, and then it would make it finally to the endpoint. The endpoint would execute that command, and then it would capture the terminal output and send it back. Well, that's essentially what they're doing here, right? They're trying to wrap the shell and give you a nice view of the shell, right? So when you send a command, it's sending a command to the shell behind the scenes. It's grabbing that output, wrapping it up, and giving it to you in nice ways. Man, the amount of time, it probably took us 2 or 3 months to figure out all the different issues that we had with Windows shells. And it was not trivial. So I'm not surprised to see this. I am disappointed because I really wanted to see it. But I'm not surprised to see this in there. I think model imports are going to be more important than ever, since currently they take writable signals, unless there's a more specific way to pass forms around that may be added. Ooh. Um, oh, you know what? There's a whole bunch of stuff that's not making it into my combined stuff. So I like the validation and disabled are and whatnot are more declarative. Yeah, I'm using model inputs a lot with reusable forms. I love model inputs. I love just regular input. I love output. So I agree with you there, Ole. I love model inputs. They're one of my absolute favorite things. Also, there may be a notion of resource built in, but the PRs for it and the branch have been kind of back and forth. Resources resources are very powerful, and they're a concept that comes from a lot of different places, right? Like even when you're writing Windows programming, you deal with resources a lot. Um, so like if you want to draw a window on screen, you ask the OS for an hwind window resource, right? And it gives you a resource that you can interact with. The OS creates the window and all of that. You just get a resource that you can say, yeah, draw the title bar, do this with it, add this content in this area, things like that. Um, Resources are very, very powerful, and you see them all over the place. Um, I don't know if, as a community, we've quite figured out resources yet in Angular. But I can totally see why it would be flip floppy. I just need to emphasize how experimental prototype this is. Yeah, um, it is very experimental. It hasn't. Well, it's so experimental. It hasn't even been released under the experimental flag in an Angular build yet, right? Um, Probably the only way you could see it is if you downloaded the nightlies and used a nightly build. Um, yeah, selector lists. So you guys, if you guys care about selector lists, you guys should go participate um, in the um, in the RFC that's out there. Um, right? If you don't like the if you don't like the syntax, add that comment, right? I will admit I was in the minority for the syntax that they chose for the control flow stuff, right? Like the at if, the at for, the at defer. Um, I preferred a different syntax, but the current syntax I've grown, I'm used to it, and I actually like it, right? Um, yeah, not even in the nightly. Okay, in branch that is old and only have the form changes. You can just copy and paste that branch's whole forms. Yeah, that's that's the nice thing about web, right? So we can just go grab everything, paste it into our repo, and we can use it. Very, very cool, Michael. So it's not even in the nightlies. That's wow. But anyway, I am a bit disappointed. I would have loved to have seen the terminal. I guess once I get upgraded to NX21 at work, I'll be able to see the terminal and tell you guys how much I like it. Or any of you guys that are running Linux, um, I I was trying to think if I had a WSL2 terminal ready. I don't think I do. Let's see. Do I have WSL down here at all? Um, I used to have one pinned, but I don't know if I do. Um, WSL. Let's see if my WSL even works. If it works, then well, that's not a good sign. My WSL doesn't work. What even happened there? Um, can I run it here? I'm probably gonna have to dig into it a bunch. I'll see if I can get a WSL terminal up and going. So maybe we can. Do I have one set up here? PowerShell, PowerShell. Maybe. Maybe. I go to mount the dev Angular Sudoku. Hey, we may have pnpm exec nx run dash many target build lint test component dash test. You know what? I love Warp. You don't have permissions to do this. All right, sudo it. Is that my pseudo password? I don't remember. I don't even know my pseudo password. Does npx work? Npx nx run dash many dash t build lint test component dash test. No. That's too bad. I'll have to figure it out. I was hoping that would work. That's unfortunate. But there are some other things we can look at. This was the big one that I was really hoping to take a look at. But there were some other big things in here. So inside of here, there's the NX console. Module federation we're not using. The continuous tasks was the one that I was also excited about. So we've got this idea of a task pipeline, right? And you can say, hey, build depends on, other builds. So you could say, like, the front end has a target of dev, and that depends on projects. So your API project and the serve target of that project, right? So this would spin up your API and the serve. This is where I wanted to get into, and maybe to do this one, we should take a look at the full stack dynos project. That's what we'll do next time, is we'll take a look at this with the full stack dynos. Yeah, because with the full stack dynos, we have to start up Nest and get Nest running. But we could build up a long running continuous project, right? So we could have it depend on the API with the serve target from Nest, right? But then we can also say, hey, in that API, we add the continuous true to it. And so it will be continuously serving the API. So that would be something cool to take a look at too. I guess the last piece that we can take a look at with this upgrade is let's go ahead and shut this down. Let's see here. That's fine. So let's do Code Insiders. And let's get our VS Code up and running. No, don't worry about Docker. I'm gonna have to upgrade a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like I'm getting all these errors and stuff. So here, I've got some deprecated extensions installed. Oh yeah, the material yep. We'll migrate that. We'll migrate that one. We'll update that one. So we need to get our Angular language service upgraded. NX console has been upgraded. And I've got a lot of extensions installed. So here we go. If we restart, we've got one extension. Oh, GitHub Copilot chat. That's gonna have to restart everything. So at this point, we've got a couple of things. If we take a look, like we've got Angular that needs to upgrade, right? A whole bunch of Angular stuff that needs to upgrade. We've got NGRX stuff that needs to upgrade. And these are things that I would typically do through NX Migrate. So I want to experiment right now, and hopefully this works. If it doesn't work, well, we'll do it at the command line, right? Yeah, we'll improve Copilot agents with NX specific stuff. Don't show again. No, don't. Oh, I have to add a server. Well, we'll see if that does anything for us. But we're now in a place where we can experiment with NX console. I think it's under the generate, and I think it's under migrate. Okay, let's go see how to do this. Instead of me just guessing and fumbling around. Yeah, introducing migrate in the NX console. A new UI for NX migration, right? See, So this is the way, we typically run migrations. The badge appears in the NX console icon. So it says we should see a badge on the NX, like you can see here, and then there's a NX migrate section. Now maybe we should have done this. Maybe the next migration we do, we'll do this way. Because what I was hoping for. Oh, here's NX migrate down here. Okay, so it only works with the latest version of NX. I was hoping. That's too bad. Because one thing we can do is like NCU, and maybe we'll come back to this here in a little bit and finish up this migration. Let's go grab a tab. And let's go back a directory and let's go into log observable, right? And log observable, if we look at NCU here, so we are on version 20 of NX, and then we've got a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to be upgraded. Let's see. Let's experiment with this new upgrade console, right? So right away we pop in. And we got to wait, I'm sure, for everything to load up. Okay, so right here we can see that we've got a migration to start. So first things first, let's go and let's create a branch. And we're going to call this branch, task migrate NX. Oh, wait. First thing we want to do is make sure that we're on main. Now let's go ahead and pull main. And we're going to create a new branch. And we'll call this chore upgrade dependencies. It already exists. Yes, it does. But if we add in a date, so 05, not 95. So if we add in a date and go May 18, 2025, there we go. We can delete this one. Okay, so now we're on a new branch. Um, so we've got our migration set up. One thing I am curious about is if we go into WebStorm, and I don't think I don't think that the NX console here is going to do a migration for us. Yeah. Yep. So this only works in VS Code, which I expected. So what does this do here? Okay. So the pencil allows us to pick the version. Um, it, it allows us to basically edit things. So if I hit start migration, we'll see down here we're getting the terminal. And let me make this bigger so everybody can, right? So we can see everything. Because the code is less important here. But I'm very well. It won't be less important in a little bit. But it's running the migrate latest task. I'm sure it's grabbing stuff in the background, and eventually it will provide us with, yeah. So we can see that it's fetching our NX stuff. So this only works on the latest, like migrating NX to NX. Um, PNPM exec is an alternative. If you're using PNPM, PNPM exec runs very similar to NX, right? And PNPX is kind of the short, like the handle for it, right? But for whatever reason, I've installed PNPM and Node through Volta, and for whatever reason, the PNPX doesn't work with Volta on my Windows machine. At least it hasn't in the past, so I've just gotten used to using PNPM exec. That's an experiment we could play with in the future also. But yeah, I yeah, PNPM exec is, if you're using the PNPM package manager, it's the same as NPX. But you can also use NPX, right? There's no reason why you wouldn't, like, you couldn't use NPX either. Um, unless you needed to interface specifically with something that PNPM was providing for you. Um, because PNPM has its own node package manager. Um, so while that's running, if we go take a look at PNPM docs, right? Um, so if we go to the docs here, under features, maybe it's under advanced, error codes, logos, recipes, configuration. Manage environments. So here you can see PNPM. I use Volta to manage my Node.js. A lot of people use NVM. PNPM can do node version managing also, right? Um, so you can use, right, PNPM environment use. Um, and so because PNPM can do these things, I think it interferes with Volta, or Volta interferes with it. Um, and I think it even um, probably faster to just search here. Yeah, using Volta. So it looks like with PNPM 10, we can use Node.js 22. Um, Maybe it's Volta where I need to go look. What? There we go. Oh, very, very bright. Um, there we go. Yeah. So global installations with PNPM. Actually, this guide has gotten a lot easier. There used to be, yeah, PNPM is experimental. You add this variable that sets up, experimental features. Um, but for whatever reason, PNPX doesn't work for me. Um, Dark Reader. Um, I do like sites that are just dark by default. But yeah, let's check back in with our VS Code. So it has grabbed all of this stuff, right? And run the migrations.json. So the next steps are we need to inspect the package.json, and then we can click the yes continue. So we aren't going to close the terminal because it's going to be reused. But what we can do is take a look at what's changed, right? So it's upgrading Angular in our package JSON. All of our Angular stuff, all of our NX stuff, right? Like all of this stuff is being upgraded. ng packager. Um, so this stuff all looks good um, from my point of view. So we can click yes, continue. And now it's going to install the dependencies using VS Code. And let's go ahead and make this bigger again, and we can close this. Well, I'll let it do whatever it wants. Oh, it says press any key Can I view this? So it's using the built-in I think it's using VS Code. VS Code can install the dependencies. But this is nice because I mean I typically manually follow this process, right? Where um wait, what's going on here? Oh, this isn't even showing what I wanted it to show. What is the Vera theme? Open the logs. No username configured. Um, so it couldn't open. It couldn't do the Git stuff for us because I don't have a user configured. Um, can I not use? Oh, it's going to inline when there's not a lot of space. But I don't really care that these are side by side. The lines aren't going to be very long. I prefer that. I don't want to activate the Vera theme. So at this point, it says to open the migrate UI. We're ready to migrate. The migrate tool, we can start the migration. Um, Interesting. So it's having trouble running this one. Um, it's saying to improve the change. Um, but this is where we could skip specific ones that are failing. Um, but it's not letting me. Don't create the commits. Oh, I guess if you wanted to. I can't, if I skip this one, So it doesn't have NX 20.3. So let's go take a look here and pnpm install. No frozen lock file. Already up to date. I heard something come through, but I didn't see it. What was it? So I think because I'm using Volta, I don't know. I'll need to figure out what's going on here. But for whatever reason, it can't find PNPM version 20, which makes sense because if I look here, or NX at 20, right? And that makes sense because if we do pnpm exec nx dash dash version, we're at 21.0.3. So it can't find 20.3 because 20.3 doesn't exist. And like if we do well, for first things we can do is volta pin pnpm at 10 so that we get the version 10 of pnpm on this one. And then if we do volta list, so we're at node 22, pnpm 10. So yeah, we can even look at our node version. So we're at 22.12, like it says here. So we can do pnpm exec nx migrate run migrations, and it should be able to run the migrations now. So it could be that I'm using Volta. It could be that I'm using pnpm. It could be that I'm using Windows, right? There's oh. Okay, sure. So it's going to completely recreate my node modules. Something probably got messed up with the Git stuff. And I don't know what happened, but that VS Code migration wasn't working. I don't know which variable I've got that's causing the issue. But you know what? I don't need to do this right now. Because that's, we were just experimenting there. I'll have to do some more experimenting on my own. The console is cool, and it seems to work pretty well. The issues that I have is that my specific environment are causing problems, and because of that, it's just going to be a bit more difficult, right? One thing that I wish we could do with the console is what I'm going to do right now, right? So pnpm exec nx migrate at angular/cli. right? And you can run migrations through NX Migrate. And the nice thing about doing that, and this is where I think there's a big opportunity for NX to make a huge win here, is if NX can analyze your packages, right, and show you the ones that could potentially be migrated through NX Migrate that have the that will typically have Angular code to run, right? So when you run like ng upgrade, is it update or upgrade? Michael, you'll have to tell me because it's been so long since I've used the ng command. But when you use that, anytime you upgrade a package that ng update can do, it's going to look for the upgrade generator. And if that upgrade generator is there, then it runs those migrations, right? So that's how it knows that there needs to be no migrations created. Yeah, update, ng update. So when you run ng update, it's going to go out and it's going to do the PNP or the npm or PNPM stuff for you, right? And then it's going to look and see if there's an upgrade generator. If that upgrade generator is there, it's going to run it for you. The nice thing about NX is that when you use NX to do this, NX is going to it's going to keep those generators. It's not going to run those generators right away. It's going to create this migrations.json file. And then you can go in and you can control the order of the migrations. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do with NX Migrate that ng upgrade or update can't do. And that's one of the really big things I like about it. You know, if like I like to upgrade all of the Angular stuff at one time. And that's why I run this command to see, hey, what Angular stuff do I need to upgrade, right? So I've got schematics. And then a lot of this other stuff I don't need to do, but NGRX I'm going to do. If there were any migrations, I can either copy them into a file, right? So I can start appending things to a file. Or you know, I can rename them, and then when I run the migrations, I can tell it, hey, run this migration, then run this migration, then run this up dog. Yeah. What's up, dog? Yep. But yeah, he just broke my brain because that's one of my favorite things to do to my daughters. Oh no, it's an up dog. What's up, dog? Yep. Exactly. So, but this way I can run a whole bunch of updates together and then run the migrations after I do it. Or, right, if there are no migrations, I can run a whole bunch of these migrates together and then run the PNPM install with the no frozen lock file. You know, lots of good reasons to do this. If we look, we've got a component store in this. Signals. Wow. So we'll do npm exec nx migrate at ngrx signals. And a lot of times when you grab one of the ngrx packages, ngrx grabs all of them for you. So that's a good, you know, that's a good thing that will happen for you. But this is another big reason why I like NX is NX took the developer experience here and made it better, right? I'm able to, yeah, and we can see that NGRX is grabbing a whole bunch of stuff. But there was an Angular there was an Angular update, and I can't remember which one it was. If it was like 7 to 8 or 8 to 9 or something like that. Um, and in that Angular update, they were looking for a specific file. Well, I didn't have that file, so that update failed over and over and over again. I added NX to the workspace. I told NX to run the migration. I went and found that migration that was failing over and over, and I just removed it from the migrations JSON. And then I ran the migration. My Angular upgrade worked, right? So I was able to fix a bad situation because of the NX migrate, and it's just a very, very powerful tool. We can see that there's still no migrations. So now we can go take a look. That's the wrong one. This is the one we want. NX instructions. Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. The get ignore adds some cursor and stuff like that. Oh. So those are cursor rules. So they added some generate AI stuff for VS Code. Oh, because I popped it open in VS Code. So these are our vibe coding stuff. So we will I'm just going to delete this file. I don't need it. The changes to the get ignore, it added some rules and then the instructions. I don't care about those either, so we'll discard those changes. And we can also delete this file. Which leaves us with just the stuff that we just did, right? The Angular migration. And then where are my NGRX files? Right here. So it got all of my NGRX, right? And upgraded them to 19.2. Now we can just say, hey, we upgraded NGRX and Angular to latest. Boom. And total YOLO moment, right? So at this point, actually, I messed that up, but we can do the no frozen lock file here. That should be fine. I have heard that if I get WSL up and running, PNPM is actually a lot faster in WSL. And it comes down to the way that Windows does file lock checks. And so the way Linux versus Windows does it, it's just much faster to do it in like a Linux type operating system. Which hopefully my wife doesn't overhear me, but it's one place that a Mac is better than my PC. Oh, yep, she heard me. we have this argument going on, mainly because I just enjoy teasing her about it. She's a huge Mac person. And so there's a lot that's good about Mac. There's a lot that frustrates me about the Mac. I have a Mac for work. You know, there are some good things about it, but there are some things that I miss from my Windows machine, I will admit. Anyway, that's all upgraded. So let's run exec nx run many. We don't want to serve. Let's do a lint test. No, we'll just run all of them again. And this is the process that I highly recommend you do. You should run this command before you commit. Um, and I want to, like, if you're watching me, um, I make this point every time, and the people who probably watch me get tired of hearing it. But you should run your tests before you commit. Um, I commit before I run my tests on stream because it's for content. I'll gladly admit that, right? Sometimes watching a streamer struggle generates good content. It also helps to back me up against a wall and say, yeah, you can't go back. So I can help solve problems that you may encounter in your day-to-day stuff, right? Um, don't do what I'm doing on stream. You know, you want that ability to back out. Um, right? Don't back yourself up against the wall in your job or your personal projects. That's just not a good way to go. So, in your personal projects, run your tests, run your builds, and then commit, right? I go the other way just because it's good content, um, right? When I'm angry, one of the most rewatched streams that I had was when I got super salty about Apollo. It's no longer out there. It was before I was streaming to YouTube at the same time, um, but I should probably upload those streams and let people see. Oh, I really struggled with Apollo. Um, but what I really like um, about Run Many, and this is the way. So at Mono Repo World last year, this is the way they said you should be running your Run Many, is put all of them together, because Run Many can run analysis and say, hey, we can put these together in a way that we're going to get better outcomes, right? Like the total execution time here, we can see it was a little bit over 1 minute, right? 1 minute and 14 seconds, almost. We can say 1 minute and 15 seconds, right? Round up. Um, but the total amount of time here is way over that. But it ordered things in such a way that we're going to get the best outcome based on the flakiness, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into the ordering that it does here. So you can see I told it to do lint and then test and then component test, but notice it kicked off 2 tests right away and 1 lint. Um, and then it kicked off another test, right? Is this one finished? Another one. And then instead of kicking off another test, it kicked off a lint when this one finished, and then another lint, and then another lint, and then a test, right? Test, lint, test, right? And then component tests were done last because they're one of the longer running tasks. So it was able to get a whole bunch of stuff out of the way, and then the final lint was done, right? So the ordering that I put it here doesn't matter because the Run Many is going to do analysis and um, kind of like masonry layouts where it's going to try and find the best ways for everything to fit together to give the best runtime based on flakiness, retries, and all sorts of stuff like that. And here it says it ran for a minute, right? Which not bad, right? We can round down and give it to it. But there we go. So we committed that. And if you guys don't know, NCU is one of my absolute favorite tools. Just a great tool for doing all sorts of really good stuff with just with it. NCU understands NPM, it understands PNPM. I think I read recently that it understands Bun. So, and I think it can do Dino also. I think. You know what? Let's not spread false information, right? Instead, let's go find NCU GitHub. So I think this is the one we want. Wait, who is Rainer Shine? Okay. So NCU stands for NPM check updates, and it's able to use. I mean, it started out doing NPM, um, and there's a whole bunch of cool stuff in here like interactive. I use interactive all the time. I love it. Um, right, filters. We just did some filtering there with Angular and um, NGRX. You can give it config files, right, so that you don't have to set these parameters all the time. Doctor's pretty cool, but I'm looking for where it says what tools it uses. You know what? Probably the faster way to do it is just to search for PNPM. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I forgot Yarn. I don't use Yarn very often. So it's compatible with NPM, Yarn, PNPM, Deno, and Bun, right? So I wasn't spreading false information. I was spreading incomplete information, right? Need to make sure that we get Yarn in there. I don't know why I really struggle with Yarn. I think part of it comes down to I enjoy PNPM, and I'm not a big fan of like Yarn workspaces and stuff, and we used a lot of Yarn workspaces at a place where I worked. I don't I don't know. Happy the Angular repo is moving away from Yarn. I think they're going to PNPM. I so PNPM, like the thing I love about PNPM is, the motivation here is saving disk space, right? Um, the whole thing that it does is like it works on saving disk space by creating symlinks to files. So if you've got a version that already exists, it's going to just point to that symlink instead of downloading it over and over again. And the amount of disk space that I save by using PNPM is impressive. Um, it also has um, some very cool features, like very similar to what we're doing here with NCU. I like NCU because I can use it with Yarn, I can use it with NPM, I can use it, with anything, right? But PNPM outdated has some very similar functionality to um, um, NCU, right? But it does some other stuff with like how it downloads and fetching and linking and all of that stuff. Um, Allows you to get better throughput on your upgrades. And it handles a whole bunch of things better than NPM and Yarn. So I'm a huge fan. Um, right, you can still do workspaces. Right, and Yarn has a hard time with peer dependencies. Um, I've never done zero installs. What was that one? I don't even know what this is. I've never done it. You can see PNPM has a whole bunch of stuff that's, I don't know. Use the package managers that you guys like, right? Um, you can see like the outdated has some nice stuff here, and you can even do like you can do very similar to what I'm doing with NCU, which we'll see here in a second. You can do an interactive. So like if we go back here and we go to usage, or we go to the commands and manage dependencies, and we look at update, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff you can do with PNPM update. And you can do like pattern stuff. So it will do pattern matching on your update. But I also think, yeah, it's got an interactive mode, right, which I really like. Um, um, and that's a huge selling point for me for PNPM. If we're not using NCU, right, we can do PNPM update -I, and you'll see that PNPM gives us a very similar experience to what we're going to do with NCU, right? So we can see, hey, I can select all of the dev dependencies, boom, right? Or I can select specific ones. So, you know, there's a good reason to use PNPM there, just in the fact that when I do upgrades, I don't want to do everything at once. I want to do I want to do things in logical chunks, right? Um, so right now, the next thing I'm probably going to do is like my linting and prettier and stuff like that, right? So I'm going to grab, um, you know, Angular ESLint. I'm going to grab ESLint. I'm going to grab, you know, TypeScript ESLint. Actually, I should be doing, so Angular ESLint could have migrations with it. So we should be doing the Angular ESLint stuff through the migrations. So that's the next piece we'll do, right? So we'll do the ESLint plugin template, and template parser. So PNPM migrate at, or actually, we want PNPM exec nx migrate at, and here we want Angular -ESLint, and it is already suggesting the plugin for me. And then we'll grab the plugin -template, and then the template parser. And we could do all of those. It's called yarn because it gets tangled. Oh, I may have to steal that one from you. Like, I try not to push my opinions too hard on stream, and it, like, you know, if it sounds like I'm coming across with a really strong opinion, just realize part of what I'm doing as a streamer is to entertain, right? And sometimes getting a reaction out of people is entertaining, right? So I do have a dislike for yarn. It borders on intense hatred, I will admit. However, if you use yarn and you're good at yarn, just take it as me not being good, and just being, you know, some streamer who's, you know, spouting off on stream because he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? It's perfectly fine for you to use yarn, right? Like, I like Michael's joke. It's called yarn because it gets tangled. Lots of people are very successful with yarn. The Angular project has been using yarn, right? So the fact that I don't like yarn says more about me, I think, than it does about yarn, right? So I just, I don't know. I always worry. Like, I am a streamer. I am out here to do this for entertainment, but at the same time, I also want to be a responsible citizen to the community that I'm a part of, right? I am a developer, right? And I don't want other developers to be like, oh, well, Jason said that. Well, yeah, I did say that, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. So, you know, do your own research. If you like it, use it, right? If your team is used to it, like, 100%. The best piece of advice that I can give you is, if your team is proficient with something and they're proficient with a certain way of doing something, that is worth way more than anything that I will ever say here, right? the productivity of your team and the understanding that your team has and the trust that your team has in each other is way more important than whether or not I like yarn, right? If your team is productive with yarn, if your team trusts others to use yarn, right, then me saying I hate yarn is, right, not worth it. Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, part of the sauce missing from Angular is that I don't think most people have hot takes that are funny, since they may be too polarizing. I hold my tongue more often than I think something spicy, right? I would rather be polite though and not mean to projects or other people's tooling. And that's one of the things that I like about the Angular community is they're a much nicer community. I think we're a much nicer community because we get beaten up by everybody else, right? Like React, you tell somebody who does React, oh, I do Angular. Oh, well, why do you do Angular, right? You tell, right? Like, I think we're kind of used to being beaten up by others, so we're less likely to beat up each other. I think if Angular were to grow, we would get more people who are, you know, who are the quote unquote mean. We need some of that, right? We need some of the people to say things how they see it, um, so that we're not all unicorns and rainbows and thinking that everything's great when we're slowly dying a slow death as we spiral the drain, right? Um, so we definitely need those people who have those takes. Um, there has been drama around that in the past, I will admit, and you can be critical of a project without being mean, right? Like we all have those intrusive thoughts, right? Those thoughts that pop into our heads, or maybe I'm projecting, but there's these intrusive thoughts that maybe we shouldn't say that, right? And to your point, Michael, somebody's put their own time, their own blood, sweat, and tears into something, um, and that in and of itself deserves recognition, right? And some respect. Um, here I am, and I say, I do this for entertainment. I also do it to teach, but the amount of time that goes into preparing streams and things like that, um, I recognize other content creators because I know how much work and effort goes into this kind of stuff, right? Like you guys saw um, just a small part of what it took to get the workshop or the Angular community meetup, right? Just the parts that I shared on stream where we were writing code and stuff. The actual research and the idea and all of that stuff, that takes plenty of time too, right? You guys all know that. You guys all write code. You guys all create things. Um, and so, I agree with your sentiment, right? If I feel like something is going the wrong way, I'm going to try and find a nice way to say that to you. Because I don't think it's good for me to be like, oh, yeah, that's amazing. And then let you go off in the wrong direction, right? Um, but yeah, yeah. I think the Renaissance philosophy has put unprecedented hostile vibes from people who are content with the status quo. Though I feel like most hot takes are signal standalone skeptics. And yeah, there's there's a famous book out there called "Who Moved My Cheese," right? And it takes a kind of cynical look at workers from a managerial point of view, where if you change things too quickly, um, right, you get complaints about who moved my cheese, similar to mice in a maze or something like, right. Um, Very cynical look, but the I don't disagree with the sentiment that there are people who are comfortable with change, right? And I recognize myself as being one of those people who's comfortable with change. I'm actually the opposite extreme of who moved my cheese. I'm the ooh shiny, right? And I need to be tempered and reined in because I'm like, oh, but we can do this and we can do it right. Like I'm reaching for all the shiny stuff, and sometimes we need to temper that also. But the other extreme is like, why did you change that? I liked it the way it was. Why did you, you forced me to change, right? So I agree with that. And quite often the people who get forced to move are going to be more vocal than, if I'm like, ooh, we could do this, and somebody's like, yeah, no, we shouldn't do that. I'll be like, ah, oh, right. I'm a little bit disappointed. Similar today, like, right, you can't do that in Windows. I'm a little bit disappointed. Actually, I'm a lot disappointed, but I recognize the reason why not. We move on, right? I really agree with your take there, Michael, that it is putting pressure on people, and people are getting scared that the new way of doing things is going to make the old way of doing things worse, right? As more and more content is written for the new way and the way they want to do it, and there's no more content that way. I agree that that's what's going to happen, but that's also what needs to happen. There's so much benefit that's coming out of signals. There's so much benefit that's coming out of standalone components, um, right? Like signal-based components wouldn't be possible. Well, I won't say that, but the Angular team has said that a lot of the technology needed to do signal-based components is coming out of Signal and standalone, right? Um, so yeah, we were really on the ball with majors, but now we are on 19.1. I think we're just going to chill here until Signal forms and selectorless. I like to stay evergreen. And I try to push the organizations that I'm with stay evergreen. And the reason for that um, is more psychological than it is anything else. As soon as you allow the organization to get comfortable staying somewhere, that means that the next upgrade we're like, yeah, we're okay staying here. And then the next upgrade, yeah, we're still fine. We're good here, right? Um, and that psychologically gives power um, to people who are like, well, that's tech debt, and we could be building a new feature, right? Um, if we stay evergreen, that changes the mindset of the organization to, oh, there's a new version. What do we need to get onto that version? Let's dedicate some time to doing some investigation. Oh, it doesn't work now. Okay, let's try back in a couple of weeks and see if our libraries have caught up. Oh, maybe we need to go make some contributions to catch the libraries up and things like that, right? It changes the dynamic of the organization where, yeah, we're okay, we're fine here, we're comfortable here, to, oh, we need to figure out how to get here, right? And a lot of times it requires like an ADR or right. I guess that's what we call them where I am now. Architectural decision record, or an RFC is what they've been called before, right? Request for comments. Whatever the governing language is in your organization, um, I will. It's one of the few places where I like to push and say we should be evergreen, right? Um, and the nice thing about going through governing bodies, if your governing bodies are set up properly, there are ways to amend those documents, right? So if your RFC or ADR winds up causing problems, you can amend it, right? Except in the case of X, Y, and Z, right? And going forward, and those amendments go through a process, where they're peer reviewed and things like that. Um, so um, I feel you, but I do like to push us to be as close to the edge as possible. Um, latest stable things, and not to have my team feel always having to be on top of things. Well, and that is a good way to look at it. Um, but on Angular 19 right now, you could be writing module based components, right? That would be totally fine. On Angular 19 right now, you could still be doing NGRX with pipes, and that would be fine, right? On Angular 19 right now, you could still be doing ngIf, right? Have you guys This is one that I really should shout out on stream. The Angular can I use? Have you guys checked this out? Like, if you guys haven't checked this out, um, Angular can I use is like my new absolute favorite. Um, you can come in here and you could say, hey, between versions, oh, what's going on here? Huh. Interesting. I wonder if this needs Chrome. Um, Let me bring a Chrome tab over. Yep. It needs Chrome. Maybe. Let's see. Before I say that, it might just be like a display bug. Oh, do I have? No, it's off. Yeah, it's oh, there's 14. Never mind. It's a display thing. I am completely wrong. Ignore me. And it could come down to, like, these are hard to see already on my monitor. I don't even know how they're showing up on stream. But we're good. So the cool thing about this is we can come in and we can say, hey, we want to go back to Angular 15, which is basically the start of the Renaissance, right? And we can see all of the stuff that's been added to Angular. Or we could go all the way back to the beginning, and see, since the beginning, what can I use where, right? And so there's some cool stuff here, like when were signals added, right? Signal. So we can come in here, we can see, oh, as of 16, signals were, they were in preview, right? 17, they became stable, right? Signal inputs, we have to be in 19 for them to be stable. I've been using them since 17.1, right? Signal queries, again, 19, right? And signal queries are things like viewchild and stuff like that, right? Signal inputs are your input and output. Signal core, you guys all know what the signal core is, right? Signal models, right? Using model instead of input and output, right? 19 is when it became stable. Effect, still in preview until version 20. Right? The converters are still experimental, right? And then, toSignal is still in preview, even though toSignal and linked signal are a big part of stuff that I do now. They're still in preview in 19, right? Well, linked signal was introduced in 19. They'll be stable in 20. So this site is really cool. One of my absolute favorite sites, and we can see there's some other cool stuff in here. So like after every render, we get good information. Like here, if you've been using it in the preview mode, when it's released in 20, it's renamed to after render, right? After next render is a good one. I actually, no, it was after render before. It was renamed to after every render. And the reason for this is that they wanted to make sure that you understood that if you use this, every single render is going to cause this to be run. So you need to make sure that this is very, very lightweight, and it really needs to be run after every time the browser runs a render. After render effect, I need to dig into this, right? Like when I was looking at this the other day, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I'm like, wait, what is this, right? View transitions have just been upgraded from experimental to preview, right? And we built a whole bunch of stuff in the Angular blog with view transitions, right? ToSignal we already talked about. Take until destroyed. Notice that that actually didn't come out of developer preview, or yeah, until 19 is when it became stable. And I've been using this for a long time, right? Output from observable is another one of my favorites. I don't use it as much because signals provide a lot of what the reason I would use that, right? So my output and things like that, I no longer have to worry about observables. But a lot of people treated their outputs like they were observables. They were kind of, but they weren't intended to always be that way. So there was this output from observable, and then output to observable are also, right? You can turn an at output, not the output itself, but the at output, you can turn it into an observable. So experimental zoneless, very, very cool. This has actually been in a lot longer, but now it's finally being moved into the experimental. It's been in there, marked as different stuff, and we've been using. Well, I've used experimental zoneless for a while. I don't remember when it was added. But the other thing I wanted to show is like, oh, ngIf. Right? ngIf is deprecated in version 20, right? Server testing module, platform server testing, Hammer.js. Hammer.js is like touch-based stuff, right? So all of the directives for for structure are being deprecated in version 20. Here we've had testingbed.get has been deprecated since version 13. They're finally removing it in version 20, right? And then this, they renamed provide experimental check no changes for debug. They renamed it to provide check no changes config. Much better, right? So there's some good stuff there. And here, there's some stuff we don't know about, right, that has been deprecated for a long time. But I'm not sure what this means. But the application config has been deprecated for a while. The Angular compiler has been deprecated for a while, right? Because of the ESBuild application builder. And so there's just a whole bunch of stuff in here that's been deprecated since version 13, right? Upgrade adapter. Have you guys, I don't know if anybody has used the upgrade adapter. Yeah, this is one of my absolute favorite websites. And Michael Dev, welcome to the stream. Thanks for being here. Yeah, Jerome is amazing. He's been doing amazing stuff. And I really need to call this out way more, just so everybody can look with it. There is one thing that the other day I was trying to determine when inject was added, and I couldn't, right? Like inject, I think inject came with the standalone API. So I think it's a part of the standalone API. But I don't know when it was added. But I highly like this. This is probably, well, I won't even say probably. I'm sharing this with everybody. There's just so much good here, right? Like even components directives pipes are now standalone by default in Angular 19, right? So you now have to specify standalone faults if you want to use module-based development, right? Love this site. And I do think inject is part of the standalone API, but I'm curious if there's a way to get things like inject so that it pulls up standalone API for you. Because I wanted to share with people, right? We've been able to use inject since 15, and inject is superior to constructor based injection. But you know, I couldn't come up with something here, right? Yeah. Yep, I've got two Michaels now. That both amazing people. So yeah, very very good site. And I mean, they provide good information, and then there's also the version insight page that's linked here, and gives you um, a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like the suspicious date format and all sorts of stuff that's here, right? You've got timelines, and you can click learn more on anything, so you can get deeper into, like, they have spent an amazing amount of time on this, and just it's well worth your time, to spend some time on this site. Like I said, I learned some stuff that I wasn't even aware of, right? Like, after render effect, I need to go figure out what that is. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, I totally agree with you there, right? And that goes back to the conversation we were having earlier. This is an amazing project, right? Um, he's put a ton of work into this, and it is incredible. Um, I don't want to be mean and be like, "Oh, this sucks," right? That's why even here, like, I want to recognize this is a display bug, and it could be my bug because of all the different things I have to do for streaming to make streaming visible and easy for people to see. Um, so you know, I don't want to throw negative light on this site. There's so much that's good here, and just an incredible labor of love. And he's been sharing this on Twitter. He's been sharing it everywhere. And you know, the more visibility we can give it, and you know, we could probably even, you know, reach out to him and ask to help, right? Just to take some pressure off of him instead of complaining. There's a lot we can do. Um, yeah, it worked. Yeah, and when I pulled it up in Chrome, it looked just fine, right? It works, right? It's a total display bug. So like if I come here and click, it totally works. So it's definitely a display bug, and it's probably on me because of all the different things, right? Like I'm using a Firefox based browser. I'm using Auto Dark Reader. I'm using a whole bunch of other things that could be, that could be causing this issue. Um, yeah. Did I try the Docs AI yet? In Blue Sky, we got to get more Angular people on Blue Sky. I and so here's the tough thing about, and yeah, I will give a shout out to Blue Sky. Um, I struggle with Blue Sky. Um, yeah, it's from plugins. Exactly, Michael Dev. I struggle with Blue Sky not because of what Blue Sky is or what Blue Sky represents, but when you're creating content, people get into habits, right? And shifting content from one place to another, um, is a monumental effort. And there's been a lot of research done into this, that when you move platforms, you're guaranteed to lose anywhere between 20 and 50% of the people who are just comfortable where they are, right? So 20 to 50% of your following can disappear just by switching platforms. Um, so I do have a Blue Sky account. I just don't go there. I don't have the habit of going there. And I'm worried about switching my content, from the platforms where people find me now to other platforms. I should extend that, right? Like I've been thinking about like Instagram. I've been thinking about Blue Sky and things like that. But I'll be honest, it's work. And at some point, I have to decide how much work am I willing to put into this. I need to put some more into my social media presence. I admit that I've been very lax in that lately. But I agree with you. Michael, we need to get more like Angular is on Blue Sky, right? The other thing that I'm really bad at is the Angular Discord. Um, and then the Angular Reddit. I used to be a lot more active on Reddit. I'm just not active on Reddit at all anymore. Um, there's just right. There's so many places you could be, and like these professional streamers, they've got all this time, um, and they're so much better at this than I am. Um, I envy them, but um, I can be better. And that's a good call out, a good snipe in a good direction, right? Um, but anyway, we just migrated our ESLint stuff. So let's go ahead and install that. And we haven't really written any code today. Like we did a little bit of fixing in the beginning, but it was more, oh yeah, we just need to update imports, right? I was talking with Michael Small and a couple other people, and I've got this idea for a card game, and it's based loosely on the idea if like I grew up with Calvin and Hobbes. I've got every Calvin and Hobbes comic book ever published. I just love Calvin and Hobbes, right? And Calvin plays this game called Calvin Ball. Um, and basically, the whole point of Calvin Ball is Calvin and Hobbes are competing against each other, but they can change the rules at any time to suit them, right? Um, my idea is what if you had a group of demigods competing to be the next new god, right? And they've got enough power to influence the game to their advantage or to their opponent's disadvantage. Um, and what if we made it like a card based game where you gave your opponents issues, right? And they could give themselves, they could give themselves helps or they could give others hindrances. And what if, how would we structure a game that is that open and free flowing, and how could we make it fun and things like that? um, so I want to get into kind of the design and coding around that. I think that's going to lead us into um, something that's that free form but also needs structure is going to lead us, I think, into something like X state, where state machines are going to control a lot of what's going on. um, and I think X state's going to give us a lot of power because I want to make the game plugin based, where you could download my repository, host it on your own server, and then add your own cards or gods or who knows what, right? Like, so the idea of you writing code that fits into the framework of this game through plugins becomes very interesting to me. Um, I got the idea of plugins from the way I interface with my chatbots is through this web server called Silly Tavern. Silly Tavern is an amazing interface for AI chatbots, and it's used a lot for like the role playing, I guess, stuff. But where Silly Tavern is really impressive to me is its plugin based system. I can write plugins for the AI bots that I want to interact with that can inject things into prompts. It can inject context. It can inject all sorts of stuff. And I can hook into that through plugins that I write purely in JavaScript. And that Silly Tavern is what it's called. Um, very cool tool. And it like it can hook into any LLM you're running locally. It can hook into Featherless. It can hook into ChatGPT. It can hook into Claude. Um, and so I can switch whichever AI that I'm using Silly Tavern, and then I've got plugins that I'm using that will I can inject context. I can inject RAG based content. I can inject all sorts of, I can inject embeddings. I can do all sorts of very, very impressive stuff. And I can write those plugins in JavaScript. Um, the downside to it is I like TypeScript, so I have to write them in TypeScript, transpile them down to JavaScript, and then provide it to the Silly Tavern runtime. And they also use jQuery, which is hilarious to me, but amazing, right? But very, very powerful tool for AI that has a good community behind it. And so I'm curious, what would it take for me to be able to create a plugin system very similar to that, but sandboxed in a way so that we can help people with security. Because I think that there are other places where plugin type architectures like that would be interesting. So like if you're thinking about like content type servers, right? Like CRM type stuff where you want very strong sandboxing regulations so one user can't access another user's stuff, but they also don't want to potentially leak their own stuff to others, right? So I'm very interested in exploring the idea of providing a platform where it's possible for people to extend your platform using interfaces very similar to the way plugins work in a lot of other areas where I've written like plugin based development. So I think that something like a card game lends itself well to that, because you could have plugins that add cards, right? You could have plugins that add potentially, right? If we go as far as AIs, you could have plugins that add AIs, right? You could have a plugin that interfaces with like ChatGPT and creates a personality for, you know, maybe you want to create your own custom whatever, and have ChatGPT help make it better, right? Or Claude, or whatever AI that you want will make what you created better. Just stuff like that, right? One thing that I was thinking about is, what if we got like a pixel art generation, image generation, and we taught it how to make sprites, right? And then we fed the descriptions of characters into that sprite generator, and it would generate sprite sheets that could be used for the display in the game, right? Using Angular 3. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you could do with a plugin like that. That's really cool, and you could write that plugin for a specific, right? Maybe you could write that plugin for specific tools, so that they don't have to be as generic for everything, and people could create their own plugins for, maybe there's a Chat GPT plugin, maybe there's a Gemini plugin, maybe there's a, right, that just gives you the ability to enhance that experience. Or right, we have generic abilities, but then we have the ability for AIs to provide sprite sheets that can be used in the game. Just fascinating ideas like that I've been kicking around for a while, and I really just want to I want to explore. So our ES linting stuff, we just finished upgrading that, and I cite myself. Wow, we're way over today. Way over today. Congratulations, bonus stream. um, but Yes, Ling. I don't know what it is, like muscle memory, right? For whatever reason, anytime I type lint, it always comes out as ing. I don't know why. Um, yeah, I definitely I should probably end things here. We've been going for 3 hours. Thank you guys for just hanging out with me. I had a good time. Um, and we were all over the place. But very enjoyable, great stream. Hey, Michael Dev, say hi to your family for me. I need to catch. I keep seeing, I keep seeing your wife's streams. I want to jump in on one and just say hi. But thank you for being here. We'll see you guys all. I want to try and do a stream this week, but with Google I/O going on, we'll see. But for right now, my mid streams or my midweek streams kind of wind up being random and bonus, um, as I'm navigating a new job, and things like that. We'll settle into a schedule here soon. But we'll see you guys all next Sunday. You guys have a great rest of your week, and a great rest of your weekend.